Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Misjudged podcast. You know, your girl, Alyssa. I'm your host. And today we're talking about prenups with the celebrity attorney, divorce attorney, Rob. So, Rob, tell everybody where we can find you and your little, Genesis story about what you do.
Sure. So happy to be here with you. My name is Robert Wallach, and I'm a divorce attorney here in Manhattan. I started my career as an assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office, and I was a prosecutor. I prosecuted homicides and sex crimes. And
Mariska Hargitay?
Yeah, just like SVU. So I did that for about 5 years.
Okay.
And at the time, I was looking to leave the office because I was getting married and I needed to make some money. And so...
You got to be a provider.
Yes.
Men.
Yes. So wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I had spent a summer in law school working for a prominent divorce attorney here in New York. Okay. And I thought that it might be something that I'd be interested in doing.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoyed the summer working for him. And so when I was looking to leave the DA's office, I looked into different opportunities out there in divorce law and ended up getting a job at a big firm where I worked for another prominent divorce lawyer, and she became my mentor. And and so that's how I got into divorce law. And that was over 20 years ago.
Oh my God.
So, yep, really long time ago. It was back in 2004 I started practicing matrimonial law.
Guys, Rob has seen so much shit. I can't wait to get into it. So today, all right, we're, like millennials, Gen Zs, like some Gen X, like they're all in the range of, marrying off, starting to get married. Maybe they're on their second marriage. Shout out. But I was like, look, when I was engaged, right, we talked about me having a prenup.
Yep.
And at the time, it was like, I had no idea, right? And I feel like there's a lot more information out there. So I wanted to do an episode to kind of like educate everybody on pre and postnups.
Okay.
And I wanted to kind of just talk about like the taboos with them and we're going to get into it. So, I'm a little chaotic. So, okay. So, they say love is forever, but also so is debt and child support, right?
Yes.
So, let's all arm ourselves with the appropriate thing. So you've worked with a lot of people that are like celebrity and non-celebrity.
Yep.
So you got lots of stories. Okay. We're going to get into them. I know a few of the stories because for a second there, I almost worked with Rob when I really needed some money. And there was a case on his little desk that I was like, you're doing that one? And there were some things. Yeah. So like, but client attorney privilege, guys.
It's all secret.
Okay. So why don't we start with just saying like, what is a prenup?
Okay. So a prenup is it's a premarital contract. Okay. And it's a contract just like any other contract that someone might sign or be a party to.
Okay.
And the important thing to realize about prenups is that it's what's called an opting out agreement.
Okay.
So there's divorce law, right? And there are statutes, there are lots of cases that dictate how divorces go if you actually litigate a divorce, right?
Okay.
And judges are guided by both statute and prior case law precedent in determining a divorce case.
Okay.
Now, what a prenup does is a prenup has you opt out of divorce law, essentially. Okay. A prenup is an opting out agreement. So you're essentially saying that we are going to opt out of having our potential future divorce case decided by a judge according to the law. And instead, we're going to contract to whatever terms we want our potential eventual divorce to take.
Oh, okay. All right. There's so much to unpack with this because there are so many misconceptions I feel out there about prenups. Okay. So what is a postnup?
Okay. A postnup is essentially the same as a prenup, except it's signed after the marriage rather than before the wedding ceremony takes place.
And like, why would people do that?
Okay. So
I've always wondered. I'm like,
so oftentimes people will sign a postnup, because the timing wasn't right to sign a prenup. So, they'll have broached the subject about a prenup, but then there wasn't enough time to get a prenup signed before the marriage. And so then they'll decide to do a postnup after the marriage. And so that's one reason.
So it's like the people that literally didn't plan accordingly.
Yes.
Or they were pussies.
Either one. Right? Either one. Now, so the one difference though, well, I shouldn't say that. Another reason why people would sign a postnup is that as the marriage progresses, circumstances change, right? And so where, before the marriage, there might not have been circumstances where people, wanted a prenup. After they get married, things might happen in the marriage where they've then decided, okay, you know what, let's predetermine these issues in the event we ever get divorced.
Okay, so like they were literally married for like a month and they're like, oh, JK, in order for this to continue, we got to put some like ground rules.
Yes. Or sometimes a marriage will progress and something will happen in the marriage. For instance, someone might have an affair, right? And so they might say, you know what, the spouse might say, in order for me to stay with you, we're going to sign this agreement that's going to, guarantee me something in the event we get divorced. Or sometimes you'll have a prenup and then you'll have a postnup after that modifies the prenup. Again, if there's some circumstance that comes up during the marriage where they say, you know what, I know that we had that deal that we signed before we got married, but now shit's happened and we're going to modify that deal and sign a new agreement.
Okay. So is there like ever a time limit on when you can do a postnup?
No.
You can. Okay. So you could be married to someone for like 35 years.
Yep. And you can still do a postnup.
What the fuck? Like that's, I always thought there was like a time limit.
No.
Holy fuck. Okay. All right.
But one thing, when you talk about time limits, people, one of the things, because the whole idea is that you're signing a contract and you want to make sure that the contract is legally valid and binding and would be upheld if it was ever challenged down the road. So oftentimes people will say that it's mandatory to have a prenup signed, X number of days before the marriage.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a fallacy because I've seen prenups upheld that were signed literally on the eve of someone's marriage ceremony, and the courts have still found those agreements to be okay, as long as all of the other strictures were complied with. So this idea that a prenup needs to be signed a month before the marriage or 6 months before the marriage is not true. However,
I always just thought it was like before you walked on the aisle and officiate.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
However, it's better if you're going to sign a prenup, it's better to sign it as far in advance of the wedding as possible. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, it makes it easier to uphold the agreement if you ever get divorced and a court has to decide it, because they would find that there might be less pressure on someone to have signed it if it's done well in advance of the wedding. Another reason, too, is that the last thing that a couple wants to be dealing with on the eve of their wedding is a contract that dictates terms in the event they were to later get divorced, right? So
they're so mentally unwell.
You know wedding planning. Oh my God. Party planning. The last thing people want to be fighting about or even discussing, are terms of what's going to happen in the event they eventually get divorced. So the idea is, let's get this prenup signed as early as we can, so then it's done and we can stow it away in a drawer and hopefully never have to pull it out again, never have to look at it again. Let's get it taken care of, and then we can go on with the planning and all of the happiness that's associated with the wedding. Okay.
Well, so, I mean, honestly, people approach weddings like, the most care and detail you've ever seen in your life, right? Because obviously I see that side of it.
Yep.
And then can you believe this? All right. So I've probably done over like 100 weddings, right? I've only had 2 clients ask me about if I know a good lawyer for a prenup. And maybe more people than that have gotten prenups.
Right.
And they just didn't run it. They didn't ask me. They didn't say anything. It is kind of personal and private. I have dealt with a lot of like super high net worth people and families. But I thought that was a little weird because they asked me about every other type of referral.
Right.
So
my guess is that many more than just those 2 have had prenups.
Yeah, I would hope so.
A situation where they either didn't want to tell you or didn't want other people to know, or they just had it taken care of much earlier.
Well, I have some facts, okay? And
Yep.
you tell me if this is relevant because so you only practice in New York or
Yes.
okay.
Well, yes. I'm only a member of the New York bar. I've litigated cases and negotiated cases in California and Connecticut, in other states.
Okay, New Jersey.
But I only in Jersey. But again, I'm only a member of the New York bar, so I can only appear in court on my own in New York.
Okay.
But I've done work in other states too. Florida. Yeah.
Okay. So you'll know this
Yes.
then. Okay. All right. So it said, I did so much research, guys. Like, you're going to be so proud of me. It said actually like only 15% of married or engaged couples like really sign a prenup, but it's rising. So that was previous years. It says around 50% of US adults have said that they're open to signing one, except really only 1 in 5 do actually sign it and go through with it. Like, a lot of people probably discuss it and like abandon it. We'll get into that. And it also said, as far as like our age range, right? So like millennials, Gen Zs, 47% of married millennials have signed them. 41% of married Gen Zs have signed, which is like apparently a very big uptick because they're just getting started on these marriages.
Yeah.
I will say Gen Z is marrying at a rapid rate compared to millennials. I have seen that. And the motivations of a prenup, this was just for prenups, were money, real estate, business interests, alimony, and pet custody.
Interesting.
Those were the top ones, guys. Did you notice how children and custody of children was in there? I'm sorry. I think that's so funny. And it said New York is the leader of the most prenups, followed by California, which is crazy because there's less people in New York than California, which is Cali, get your ass together. So does that sound correct to you?
So actually, all of those statistics sound pretty correct to me.
Yeah.
A couple of things I'll point out though.
Okay.
So it is true that that there are more prenups now that are signed than there were even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it is true that the people signing prenups are now younger than they've ever been in the past. So it used to be, if we go back historically, prenups were usually something that were relatively common for second marriages, right?
Really?
And so
was it just like rich people?
So it was usually second marriages and or rich people, and oftentimes it was both, right? It was someone who had been, in their opinion, burned in their first divorce and wanting
they got to give up the yacht, guys. We had to give up the yacht.
So they want to ensure that they're protected in their second marriage and a potential divorce. And so we used to see that, right? That used to be the prototypical prenup scenario. And that's changing.
Yeah.
Okay. It's changing. And the agreements themselves are much less taboo now than they used to be, right? It used to be that prenup was kind of a dirty word and people didn't want to broach the subject. They saw them as being really unromantic.
Yeah.
And they never wanted to do it unless they felt they had to do it.
Okay.
Nowadays, it's become much more common.
Yeah.
They're much more widely accepted. People understand that marriage is not only a romantic partnership, but it's also a financial partnership.
Oh, it's all the things. Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's a sexual partnership. And it's all
everything.
Of these different things. And
pet partnership, guys.
Yes.
We're pet custody.
So what people do is they say, you know what? Look, if we look at the statistics, 50% approximately of all marriages end in divorce.
Is that?
Let's be realistic about this. Sometimes it's a little bit more or a little less, but I think it's right about that. And so people say, you know what? If there's a 1 in 2 chance that we might get divorced, let's at least establish some ground rules. So that way, if we do get divorced, we don't have this, years long court battle where we're fighting each other. Let's at least establish some ground rules and parameters. That way we don't have to fight about that stuff if we get divorced.
This is my thing. And I've seen this because I've had a lot of friends, all stages of life. They're all ages. And I've seen some of my wealthy friends go through like wild divorces where it's like, okay, so you'd rather, no offense to your people, and by your people, I mean lawyers. Like you'd rather give $400K in legal fees to this person than like split it amongst yourselves because you're fighting over. Sometimes it's like, I'm sure you've seen this, like purely ego. It's not even like, sometimes people will drag it out to the death over like something that they already paid legal fees in.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So I've had a number of clients over the years who've told me, I would rather pay you than
fuck her.
pay my spouse, right?
And
it's
I want him dead.
Right? It's been husbands saying that about their wives and wives saying that about their husbands. And so that is it's a not uncommon sentiment, right? They would say, and the more money that people have, the more resources they have to fuel the fight.
100%.
The reality is in New York, it's too expensive for most people to litigate a divorce. It's too expensive for most people to fight in court because they can't afford lawyers.
It's crazy, right? Actually.
Lawyers in New York tend to be really expensive.
No.
And to actually go to court and litigate a divorce all the way to trial, right? You're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars.
That is so fucking crazy. Honestly,
the reality is that most people can't afford that. And most people realize, you know what, fuck it. Like, we're going to have to settle these issues ourselves because we can't afford to retain lawyers and to have our lawyers fight for the next 2-3 years in court. I've had divorces that have lasted longer than marriages. I've had divorces that have lasted 5 years, 6 years.
Did you work on Bethany?
Did you work on a 2-year marriage?
Did you work on the Bethany Frankel one?
I represented Bethany's ex, Jason Hockey.
That was like 10 years.
I didn't do the underlying divorce. I represented Jason in their post-judgment child custody case.
Okay.
And I did that trial.
He's got Jason. Stories, guys.
So
that was nasty.
But again, the more money that people have, the more resources they have to fuel the fight. Because you don't hear about, people that have a combined $100,000 in assets fighting a years-long divorce. They just can't afford to do so. So it's usually the rich people right, who have the money.
Celebrities.
And that's who, those are the cases that you hear about that last 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. I can say that in my experience, the longest divorce I've had was about, I think, 8 years, if we're talking about just the divorce portion. Some of them, because some of these cases, they take on a life of their own. And so you'll do a divorce.
Like they're trying to have each other killed or something.
The divorce will be granted, and then there will be something that will come up post-judgment, post-granting of the divorce, where they'll continue to fight, right? Whether it's a child custody issue or a child support issue or some other financial issue. And then the fight can just go on indefinitely. And I've had those situations. I've had situations where I've done the prenup, I've done the divorce.
They keep it in the fam.
And then I've done post-divorce work for clients. I mean, that's a repeat customer. It's something that we don't typically have.
Oh my God, I would love a repeat.
But
wait, send them my way when they get married again. No, I'm so serious. Like, we got to keep it in the fam.
Yep,
but wait, so the longest one you had, the 8-year one, was that a celebrity one?
That was not a celebrity one. That was
just a rich person.
Who had a lot of money.
A private rich person. We love that person. Yeah. Call me. Okay, so I'm going to just ask you some rapid fire questions. Sure. Okay, so what can they actually protect? Because I feel a lot of people are very misinformed about this. Like, can you actually prearrange custody?
So no.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tell me what you can protect.
Okay. So in a prenup, you can't contract regarding unborn children. Okay. So if a couple has no kids and they're getting married, you can't, look, you can put those things in an agreement, but they're unenforceable, right? And the court would then say, you know what? The law says you can't contract for unborn kids. We're going to disregard those provisions.
But if you have a child.
So that's something different. Okay. So if we're talking about unborn kids, right, that means child custody doesn't go in a prenup. It means child support doesn't go in a prenup, because a court is always going to be guided by, when it comes to custody, always going to be guided by the best interests of the children in determining what a custody regime should look like. Okay. So now, as far as kids that are there, and we do this a lot, we'll have post-nup situations.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Where the parties will already have kids. Okay. In those situations, the answer is yes. You can have custody and child support provisions in a post-nup when there are children that are born to the marriage. Now,
have you ever?
With one caveat. Okay. The one caveat is that at the time of the divorce, right, the court will look at those provisions not as 100% binding, but they will be guided by what the party's intent was in putting those provisions in. Because at the end of the day, the court can always overrule the contract when it comes to kids if it's in the kid's best interest. Okay. So for instance, if the parties say, mom has custody in their agreement, but then, after the agreement is signed, shit's happened and mom becomes an alcoholic or a drug addict, and it is contrary to the best interests of the child at the time of a divorce that mom have sole custody, and dad says, you know what? Yeah, I might have agreed to that 3 years ago, but the situation's changed. A court is not going to say, well, too bad. Right? Mom automatically gets custody because that's what you guys agreed to several years before. The court's always going to be guided by the best interests of the kid.
Okay, so if someone becomes a scumbag degenerate, we can amend things. That's great.
And the court's there as a backstop to protect the children in situations like that.
Well, so, okay, my question is, have you ever, this is like, all right, I feel like we're going to start a revolution because I don't think like a lot of people know this, but okay. Have you ever seen a situation where somebody like literally just pushed out a baby and they like deliver them a post-nup? Like, okay, so if you don't lose that baby weight, it's over. I don't have to pay you alimony because fuck you, and sign this right here. And it's like, would that happen? Could that happen?
So what you mentioned in that hypothetical was something that we call a lifestyle clause. Okay.
Yeah.
And so something like, if you don't lose X number of pounds within this time period, then I don't have to pay you money. Or if you gain, and I've seen this in agreements before, people will put in provisions that say,
if you
gain 20 pounds during the marriage, then you're disinherited. Then you don't get any money.
Okay. So then women will put in, if you get cancer, we don't have to fucking take care of you. Peace out.
So, right. So there've also been provisions that people have put in that say, like, the wife has to have sex with the husband, 5 times a week. Otherwise,
what if he can't perform?
So these are all lifestyle clauses, right? And
how can you uphold that?
They're typically unenforceable, right? Because the courts have found that things like that, like weight gain or having sex a certain number of times in a contract, courts have found that those are unenforceable provisions, right? Courts don't want to micromanage how parties live their personal lives.
Yeah, well,
during the marriage.
Those things can be affected by so many things, right? Like your sex drive can be affected by an illness, or like your menopausal or whatever. You're sad because you're depressed,
Right. So we typically won't put those types of lifestyle clauses in an agreement because we know that if the agreement's ever challenged down the road or litigated, court's going to throw those out.
So
court's not going to punish someone financially because, you said you were going to have sex with him 5 times a week and you haven't done that. And so therefore you're screwed. The court's not going to do that.
You didn't give him blowjobs to completion every week. You're done. Right. You lost everything.
Exactly.
Okay. So, all right. So we can protect children that already exist.
Yep.
Otherwise it's a post-nup. And business interests. So like when we were talking about a prenup, I was getting involved with somebody who had a shit ton of debt.
Yep.
So it was like going to protect me against their debt and also keep them from fucking up my company, because guess what? People get interest, you said, on the company.
Yes. So let me just differentiate. Okay.
Yeah.
Between what the law says in New York versus what you might opt out of having the law say in a prenup.
Okay.
So the law in New York. So New York is what's known as an equitable distribution state, meaning that marital assets, which are assets that are earned or acquired during the marriage, that they're to be divided equitably in the event of a divorce. Now, it's not an automatic 50-50 division like you have in community property states like California, right? If you get married in California without a prenup, everything that both of you earn during the marriage is automatically split 50-50.
Shut the fuck up.
Okay.
That's illegal.
So New York is different in that way, because what New York does is New York says that those assets, those marital assets, should be divided equitably.
What does that mean, by the way?
What does that mean? So it means fairly, right?
Okay.
And what the court looks at, they look at a whole range of factors, but they look at contribution, right? They look at who earned the asset, who put in the work, but they also look at each spouse's contribution to the marriage itself.
So they don't fuck moms.
So they do not.
Okay.
At least they try not to. So if you have a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home homemaker, okay,
yeah, she doesn't get fucked.
Correct. The idea is to value those non-economic contributions in the same way that you're valuing the person who actually went out and worked and earned the asset.
We love that.
Okay? So when we look at equitable distribution, the court looks at what each party's contributions were to the marriage and to the assets, and then divides them accordingly. Okay. Now,
so a girl can't just come in with nothing, have a baby with someone, and then take all their assets.
So that's
because I think a lot of men think that.
Yeah, and that's very unlikely to happen.
Okay,
right?
men.
Very unlikely to happen. Now, traditionally, what prenups often did, and now they've gotten a little bit more complex, but what prenups often did was they protected a party's separate property. Okay.
Yeah.
We just talked about marital property. It's property earned or acquired during the marriage. Separate property is property that's earned or acquired by a party, either before the marriage, right? So all that time leading up to the marriage, or property that was earned after someone files for divorce, right? That's someone's separate property. Now, the way that it gets a little bit dicey is that you could have someone coming into the marriage with $10 million. Okay. That's their separate property even without a prenup. That's still their separate property. But the question is, what happens to that $10 million during the marriage?
Yeah.
Okay. Because the appreciation on that money is marital. It's marital appreciation. So that appreciation could be divided equitably. Okay.
So 10 years. So it's 10 years. If that 10 million turns into 20 million, then you can split the 10 between.
That 10 million in appreciation could be split. And so what people often try to do is, with a prenup or a postnup, they try to protect not only the separate property, which is even protected without the agreement, but they try to protect that appreciation on their separate property and make sure that doesn't become marital and doesn't become split. So what we often see in prenups is we see separate property protected, as well as all of the increases in value in that separate property.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we can do that. Real estate.
Yes. So real estate, same thing. All right. Real estate is just a different asset class.
Yeah.
Just like, money in the bank or stocks in a stock account, and business interests too, right? Especially if that business is an income producing business. People say, you know what? I spent 20 years building this business of mine. Yeah. I don't want a piece of that business going to my spouse in the event we are potentially going to get divorced down the road. Right?
I understand
those are
that.
often protected too.
I understand that. I mean, literally. But also, let's talk about the debt of it, because the funniest thing about me is I feel like anyone I've been friends with, whatever, it's always the, no offense, men, brokest man in the room that's the most worried about it. And I know people that literally make 50 million a year and they're like, it's whatever, I'm going to be fine. I think because they know when they're at that level, my lawyers will destroy you anyways. So they're not as worried, but it's always the medium rich dude that's she going to sign a prenup. And it's you don't know what she has going on.
So I've seen people that don't have a pot to piss in, that are super territorial about their stuff. And I've seen people who have hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Who are the cheapest people you've ever met.
Oh, I've met them.
So I've really, I think that's more of an emotional thing.
Yeah, an emotional maturity
trait than, than something that is directly related to how much money someone has.
Yeah, we're talking about EQ here. So clearly not everyone has it. Okay. All right. So, all right. So we've talked about what they can protect. Can we just quickly talk about debt?
Sure.
Because if someone comes into the equation and let's say they have like 200,000 in student loans still, and they're in their 40s, how do you, like, can you protect against that? So you're not on the hook.
Yep. You can protect it. You can protect marital debt and you can protect separate debt in the same way that you can protect marital assets and separate property assets.
What do you mean marital debt?
So marital debt is debt that is earned or acquired during the marriage.
You can protect that in a prenup?
Sure.
Oh.
I mean, you can.
Do you already have to have it?
You can have provisions in a prenup that says that in the event that one party accumulates debt during the marriage, that it doesn't then become the responsibility of both parties together. It's only the responsibility of the party incurring that debt.
I love that. Yeah. I never knew that.
So in the same way that you can also assign responsibility for separate debt too. So if someone comes into the marriage with debt, let's say student loan debt, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt.
Yeah.
You can say in the agreement that under no circumstances will the other party become responsible for that debt.
I love this because so many people are still, our millennials got fucked with student loan debt, right? And there's still so many people out there with good jobs that just didn't prioritize like paying it off, which is a whole separate issue. But like, we don't want to be out here. And like, I didn't realize until I was going to get married and you were like, his debt will become your debt. And I'm like, what? Hold on. I don't want to be paying that off. I already paid my own off. You know what I mean?
You want to make sure that you're not walking into a situation where all of a sudden you become saddled with someone else's debt. And especially if someone's accumulated a lot of debt, that might be an indication that they're likely to continue to accumulate debt. You want to make sure that you don't become responsible for that.
Can that ruin your credit score?
Sure. I mean, if you have a lot of marital debt, and again, it's usually sort of a melting pot of debt, right? It can certainly affect your credit score in the same way that a dozen other things can affect your credit score too.
Even if you put in the prenup, like if he runs up the credit cards because he's an irresponsible dickhead, which by the way, girl, why are you marrying him? Like that's not my debt. So then how does that affect your credit score if it's not your debt?
So just because you sign a prenup, right, doesn't mean that you don't have responsibility. Okay. To watch your shit during the marriage. And so, and I say that on both sides, right? Because if you're saying in a prenup that your separate property or money that you earn yourself remains separate and doesn't become marital property, then you have responsibility for ensuring during the marriage that you segregate that money. Okay. So
got it.
Normally, if you don't have a prenup, all of the money that you go out and earn during the marriage is technically marital, meaning that even though you were out there working and earning this money, your spouse can make a claim towards a percentage of that money. Okay. If you have a prenup though, that says that all of your earnings would remain your separate property, then it's incumbent on you to make sure that you segregate those earnings and that you're putting them just into a bank account in your own name. Because if you start to commingle them, which means you take assets that are your separate property and mix them with other marital assets or with assets that are his separate property, okay, then it fucks everything up. Because then it becomes really difficult in the event of a divorce to unwind everything.
Yeah, right? So stop fucking everything up, guys.
So it's incumbent on you in the same way. Same thing goes for debt too. It's incumbent on you to live a responsible financial life during your marriage and to adhere to the provisions of the prenup. So if you're going to protect your income, make sure that you're segregating that income. Okay. If you want to protect that debt, okay, make sure that you don't become responsible for someone else's debt, then make sure that they're not incurring debt in your name or on your accounts.
You've answered so many of my questions. He's so informative. Guys, we love Rob. Okay, so you can this is kind of like pre-organizing your divorce without your children that are not born yet. Yeah. So you can like kind of just lay out a whole foundation of like, this is how our marriage will be with the finances. But like, what if you have no idea? I mean, we see this a lot. I'm going to use Real Housewives as an example again. These women come into a marriage with nothing. Maybe they signed a prenup. They start making money from the show. They start getting brand deals. Now they're making money. And then we have to see the men when they get divorced, like they take that.
Right. So usually,
how do you protect if you don't know?
So usually what you do in a prenup
Yeah.
is you make all of these financial provisions reciprocal, right? Meaning what's good for him is also good for me, right? And so they're reciprocal for both parties. So if there's something in that agreement that let's say you're getting married to a guy and your agreement says that everything that your husband has, coming into the marriage and everything that he earns during the marriage is his separate property, then the reciprocal for you is true too. So everything that you might earn during the marriage would also be your separate property. So if you go out and you become one of the next Real Housewives of New York, okay, and all of a sudden start making a boatload of money, then that money would be yours, right? Just as what he has is protected for him, what you have or what you might acquire could be protected for you too.
So this settles like a huge misconception, because I think a lot of people always think the prenup only benefits one party, but like it doesn't. And actually men are always surprised when I've been dating and I'm like, I want a prenup. And they're always like, say less, queen. And I'm like, you don't understand, bitch. It's about me, not you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And they're usually, so the best prenups, right? The best prenups are the prenups that protect both parties.
Yeah.
Right. That aren't just one-sided agreements. They're agreements that are fair to both.
Yeah.
That protect both and that give each party what they want. That's a successful agreement. When the husband gets what he wants out of the agreement and the wife gets what she wants out of the agreement, those are good agreements.
Okay. So do you know who did the Bezos one?
I can't talk.
That's a yes. Okay. All right. We know that one.
Specific.
We know that one was probably not like that. I think when you have billions of dollars, that's probably not the prenup.
So I'll say one thing about that. Okay,
Yeah.
is that usually in very high net worth situations with prenups, if you have one spouse who has 10x or 100x or 1,000x what the other spouse has, usually there are provisions in the agreement that make it fair, or at least relatively fair, for the non-moneyed spouse. So for instance, if we're dealing with a billionaire, right, and he's marrying someone who has very little in the way of assets. It could be she too.
Yeah.
Okay. If she has billions of dollars and she's marrying a guy who has relatively little in the way of assets, usually what the agreement will provide is something that we call a distributive award. And what this is a payment, okay, that helps level the playing field a little bit and gives the non-moneyed spouse some money. So that way she or he is not exiting the divorce with nothing, because that would be patently unfair, right? So if you have someone who's worth $100 million or worth $1 billion, usually that person, okay, if they're marrying someone who has nothing, usually that person is going to pay a sweetener to the non-moneyed spouse,
on their wedding day.
It's
like here's $7 million.
So it could be payments during the marriage. It can also just be payments that happen upon a divorce. Okay. And so usually you'll have these distributive award payments, and sometimes they're keyed to the number of years people have been married. Sometimes they're keyed to the number of kids that a couple has, but there are usually payments in there that make the agreement, at least if not 100% entirely fair, that usually make the agreements a little bit more fair.
Okay. And I have my final question on like the structure of them is infidelity.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like we are allowed to put that in a prenup. Like if you fuck somebody else and I get proof, I get everything. This goes null and void.
So the answer is yes.
I love that.
And I've had situations myself in my practice in the last 20 plus years where we've enforced adultery provisions. Now, they usually require that you have a trial to prove that the adultery actually took place.
What do you mean by a trial?
Okay,
like we're doing a criminal trial.
Right. So it's a civil trial, right? It's not a criminal trial. I mean, look, it could be a criminal trial because technically adultery is still a crime in New York. Okay. It's just not something that's ever prosecuted, but in this context, it's a civil trial. So what it will say is that the agreement will say that if the court finds that one spouse committed adultery, okay, then the other spouse is entitled to X, Y, and Z. And I've had situations where we actually had a trial, right? It wasn't a jury trial. It was a bench trial with a judge where we presented evidence to prove that the spouse committed adultery. And then upon proving that, the judge said, okay, well, because adultery was proven, then the other spouse is entitled to X, Y, and Z per the agreement. So you can have that.
I love
Now,
this.
I'll mention one other thing when it comes to adultery, because I mentioned it before. So sometimes you'll have an adultery, or sometimes you'll have a postnup that's signed because of someone's adultery.
Which I get that.
And that is because, right,
Yeah.
you've got a spouse who committed adultery, who decides that in order to save the marriage, they're willing to guarantee the other spouse a certain amount of money, right? As a sweetener.
Love that.
to keep the other spouse in the marriage and to stay married. So sometimes that will prompt people to sign a postnup.
Do you see that a lot with celebrities?
Sure. I mean, I think that, the celebrity practice and celebrity cases, they're just a microcosm of all of the other cases.
Yeah.
And the stuff that goes on in regular cases, we'll call them regular cases, goes on in celebrity cases. And the stuff that goes on in celebrity cases goes on in regular cases.
I will say, I feel like that's probably the athlete provision in the postnup, because athletes are so bad at staying faithful, man.
So I think that I can honestly tell you that I don't think that athletes have a higher incidence of cheating than any other segment of the population that I deal with. And from experience, I can tell. I mean, now my experience might be different from your experience, but I can tell you with that in the cases that I've handled, it's, cheating is out there and it goes on a lot, and it can be, someone could be a business owner or an entrepreneur or a tech executive or a finance guy or girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they usually they encounter these types of cheating situations in the same levels that someone who's an actor or someone who's an athlete or someone who's in another area.
I do feel that mo money, mo problems. And I honestly feel like the most cheating I've ever seen always happens at like a little bit of a higher bracket, honestly. Like people that don't have money still cheat. Trust me. They're just bad about getting away with it. They don't care. They've got as much to lose. But people that are like super successful, I find there's more people that are like, hey.
Well, there might be more opportunities to cheat, right? Because someone who's successful might be more attractive to others out there because of his or her success.
Yeah.
Right. In the same way that people who are super hot, right, might have more opportunities because other people might be willing to throw themselves at someone who's super hot. Right.
Yeah.
So that's, again, I think it's money. I think it's looks. It could be lots of other things.
But so cheating can be put in prenups and we can say, fuck this whole thing. I'm going to fuck this whole thing up if you cheat on me. And have you ever seen somebody like, I would do this if it was in the prenup? I'd hire a PI 100%.
So you usually have to, right? Because in situations like that, if you're going to prove adultery, right, there has to be some evidence. So unless you're finding
it can't just be your best girlfriend
or photos or videotapes, which we found before, right? It's been so that's evidence, right? You've got to come to court with evidence that shows that someone committed adultery. And so there are lots of different types of evidence, but one of those ways that we prove it are through the use of private investigators, where they will tail people, going and traveling with somebody or going into a hotel room with someone or that type of thing.
I actually had a PI follow me once and they were so fucking bad about being chill that I actually picked up on it and texted my lawyer. Like, I feel like this dude's been following me and I think I'm crazy. And he was like, no, girl, this actually gets done. Cause I had an injury case and I had surgery on my fucking ankle and they were literally like, did she really? And I'm like, they were following me around, like hobbling all over the city. But they were so fucking obvious. And I am not a paranoid person. So like, hopefully they're doing better than that.
So yeah. So I mean, it's a big business.
It's so funny.
And like anything else, there are really good ones and there are
really bad
ones. So.
They were like at the gym, like just standing behind me like this. And I'm like, hello, bitch, who are you? Get her out of here. Yeah, ridiculously bad. Okay. So what you've seen, do you tend to see more men versus women initiating that?
initiating
like a prenup.
So prenups are usually initiated by the party that has more money or more assets, or is inclined to want to protect something.
The smarter person.
And so that could be a guy, it could be a girl.
Mm-hmm.
It's really more financially dependent than it is gender dependent.
But you haven't seen like more men versus women just in general?
I'd say it's probably in the 20 years I've been doing this, I've probably had more situations where men demanded prenups. But again, that was only because historically, right, the gender roles have evolved. But historically, like I said before, there were lots of situations where second marriages and people wanting to avoid messy divorces. But nowadays, I have just as many situations where I've got women
we love
wanting
that.
prenups, and
like me,
and the men aren't as successful.
Yeah, the birth rate's dropping for that reason. We've just become too good, honestly. Okay, so you answered a few of my questions, but all right, what's the craziest reason you've seen one get thrown out?
So there are only a limited number of circumstances in which a prenup gets thrown out, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about an entire agreement being thrown out.
Yeah.
And it's usually when someone didn't have a lawyer and didn't really understand what they were signing. Okay, that's one situation. Another situation,
like duress, then.
Well, no, that's something different.
Oh, okay.
But usually when someone didn't have a lawyer and didn't know what they were signing, that's number one.
Okay.
Duress, which you just mentioned, is number two. Now, duress is not what most people would normally think about when they think about duress, right? Because there was a big there was a big issue surrounding duress, where people thought that a threat to not marry someone constituted duress.
Are
right?
you serious?
If you went to your fiance and said, either sign this agreement or I won't go through with the marriage, and then the person signed the agreement, that was found and has been found not to be duress.
Okay?
So that's not duress. Duress in the literal sense, duress is holding a gun to someone's head and saying, sign this agreement or else. That's duress.
Like maybe they just had a miscarriage and they're like in the hospital, or like that kind of thing.
So again, so all of these things are really case specific.
Okay.
However, I will say that most of the things that you and I would consider to be duress have not been found to be duress by the court.
Scary.
Okay? So
courts are scary, dude.
Now, and then the other reason why prenups have been thrown out is because they're just so poorly drafted, and that they don't contain all of the legal language that's required to be in agreements. Because in addition to just laying out the terms, there are other statutes that have to be complied with, and there's language that has to be in the agreement. So that's another reason.
ChatGPT.
Yep.
ChatGPT.
So
we can't do them on ChatGPT, guys. You heard it here first.
Another reason is if there isn't financial disclosure, because with a prenup, both sides have to fully disclose all of their assets and all of their liabilities. Everything.
Oh,
and
shit.
So, now, it doesn't have to be to the penny, and it doesn't have to say, with this 10-digit account number, and this is exactly how much is in the account and all that. But at least the assets have to be identified, and usually attached to a prenup is a schedule of each party's assets and liabilities. And if that's not included, and if there wasn't that type of disclosure, then an agreement can get kicked.
Oh my God, you have to disclose all your shit.
And this is why it's important to have good lawyers drafting your prenup, because if all of these strictures aren't complied with, the agreement can get thrown out.
Oh my God.
And lastly, I'll mention one last thing. Lastly is if the agreement is so unconscionable, okay, meaning it is so crazy and so one-sided or so punitive that someone in their right mind would never sign it, then it could get thrown out.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah.
Okay, so ChatGPT is not going to draft your fucking prenup, guys.
Right.
Like,
both
just don't even.
Need lawyers. You
yes.
need to have both sides have competent lawyers.
Don't get me started. Everyone thinks they can do everything themselves right now, and we're going to see so much fucked up shit by 2027. It's going to be amazing. Everyone's going to pay for these mistakes. I can't wait. I can't wait to fix all the 2026 weddings everybody's planning on their own. ChatGPT is not it. So like, people are using it for therapy. It's getting weird. No. So you need to have correct terms. You need to financially disclose everything. You need to use a lawyer that puts the correct statutes in it, and you need to not do it on AI. Got it. We love that.
All the above. Yeah.
Love that. Don't be a fucking dick too, because clearly that's not
fair.
Dude, there's been so many that have been thrown out. Like actually, one of again, Real Housewives, literally she was like a little model and married this plastic surgeon. He was like making shit tons of money. She had signed a prenup. They threw it out. So I'm like, what did he put in there? Now I'm wondering, because, that was Florida, though. Actually, it's probably even crazier that it got thrown out in Florida, because that seems like the wild, wild west to me.
It is. Florida is kind of the wild.
Okay. All right. So have you ever... All right. Well, you already answered this, like the unconscionable one, but I was going to say, have you ever seen anybody like amend it to like truly only benefit themselves, and the other person was like blissfully unaware?
Well, it's not that they were blissfully unaware. It's that they signed something where in the moment, right, they decided to sign it without thinking about the repercussions of it. So I've had plenty of people come to me, right, when they're going through a divorce, and they signed an objectively shitty agreement, an agreement that if you were representing them, you'd never let your client ever sign.
Yeah.
And then they come to you when they're getting divorced and say, I'm saddled with this agreement, like, help me get out of it. And I should have never signed it, right? Because people often have regrets when they enter into these contracts, and they're not thinking about it at the time, because they think, oh, you know what? They're optimistic. They're not necessarily realistic. And they're thinking, we're never going to get divorced, right? I'll sign the agreement,
oh my God,
but we're never going to get divorced. It's never going to be enforced. It's never going to happen. And then, 5, 10, 15 years later, they get divorced, and then they're stuck with the shitty agreement they signed, right? And the excuses can run the gamut, but at the end of the day, they knew what they were signing. They may not have fully understood it, or at least they now claim that they didn't fully understand it.
But nobody gives a shit.
They knew what they were signing.
The courts don't give a shit.
And then they're stuck with it.
Yeah, the courts don't care.
They made the deal, and they have to live with it.
Yeah. So like I've had this fight with so many of my friends, especially because we're all in different places. Like I've had to protect my business with like the craziest contracts. Like my contracts, my prenup is going to be, I don't fuck around with contracts, but I have had so many friends be like, I'm going to do this thing. The lawyer's so expensive. I'm going to go to this guy because he's this. And I'm like, this is the one place I've learned in my travels, because I've been through some shit, to never, ever cut corners.
Yes. You can't skimp on this, right? This is, people are often penny wise and pound foolish when it comes to prenups.
I love that.
And it's something that they should not roll the dice with. They need good lawyers because they don't want to end up regretting it down the road.
So I saw a stat, and I'm not going to make you like disclosure rates, but like it was basically a decent prenup, this city can range from $2,000 to $8,000 for like a very uncomplicated one where you don't have too many assets and you're just trying to lay something out bare bones. And it could be upwards of like over 20,000 plus if you have like a shit ton of assets. Is that kind of like on par?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen agreements, like you said, that are a couple $1,000s.
Yeah.
And then I've had agreements that have cost parties more than $100,000 or $200,000, depending upon the length of the negotiation, the amount of drafting, the complexity of the agreement, all these different things. But sometimes these prenups, it's not something that's done in a matter of a few weeks. Sometimes the negotiations with these prenups can take months and months, or even years. Years. What
are we doing? What are we having a wedding? When are we having the wedding? That's crazy. Well, so I think it's funny because when people get really cheap about stuff, it actually makes me laugh, because I'm sitting here watching people pay. I've watched people pay over $500,000 on a wedding, and we're going to be cheap about $5,000 on a prenup. Right, it's like the funniest shit ever to me. Or like somebody who regularly, like maybe they just don't know how to manage their money, but they're like rolling around here with like Dior bags, and they're like, oh, I can't afford that one lawyer though. And in like, where are we kind of putting the bar here?
Yeah,
like,
no, of course.
Yeah. So I'm always like a big proponent in investing, guys. It's like worth it. So just don't be a cheap shit. Okay. Okay. So this is my thing that I've struggled with over the years, like when I'm not needing your help with things. But like, how do people actually find a good lawyer?
It's a good question.
It's hard
nowadays with
It's hard.
everything. So I will say that the vast majority of my referrals and the way that people normally get to me is I get lots of referrals from other lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
I get lots of referrals from clients and former clients.
Yeah.
From friends, from family, and also sometimes I'll get, and this is when you know that you've done a really good job, is sometimes I'll have the opposing party in a prior case.
That's so funny.
Refer their friends to me.
They're like, he roasted me so hard in court.
Exactly. So, and like,
so
this is who you want, right?
Yeah. No,
this person was the worst ever,
Yeah.
towards me. And so this is why I think you should hire him. I've
That's
had
such
that
a glowing
situation
review.
before. Exactly. That's the highest review. So that's one way, right? I get lots of referrals from people's other lawyers, from their financial advisors, from people in their network and in their circle.
Have you
their
ever
trusted network and circle?
Have you ever had a referral from a client that you were like, I hope to never see this person again, and you were almost like, I don't want this referral?
So thankfully, at this point in my career, I can be somewhat particular about the cases I take on.
Okay.
And if
We love that.
I think that the best way to find a lawyer is getting a name from someone that you trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because someone who's had experience with that lawyer before, is the best way. Just picking someone based on what you see or read online,
bullshit.
is
it's actual bullshit.
Look, it's I like to think that people aren't going there for their going online for the primary source of information. That they're getting a referral from someone who they trust, and then perhaps they go online just to check it out and just to confirm what they've heard. But people who are only choosing lawyers based on what someone's website looks like or what they read online, it's just you never know how it's going to work out.
Yeah, Rob's already my divorce attorney. I've already planned it out. Just kidding. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to. But guys, I've known Rob since his kid was like in middle school, and then he tells me he's going to college, and I feel old as fuck. Okay, because we get younger and cuter, but the kids grow up, and it's very depressing. So you were married to another lawyer.
Yes,
and I like have never forgotten this. I've actually told this to so many people who are like divorcing. I'm like, when they're like, oh, I didn't want to do this or this. I'm like, I know a like literal divorce attorney who married another lawyer. And you told me had like the crispest divorce because it was just like we'd arranged everything.
Yeah. So my ex and I happen to have a really good relationship.
Yeah.
And I've been divorced for many, many years at this point. She's remarried and she's happy. And we have a great relationship and a great co-parenting relationship. And I think that, one of the things that I did when I got divorced is I prioritized peace.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to have the type of relationship that I have now. And now that's not to say that back when we were going through our divorce, because our divorce took a little while.
Yeah.
But back when we were going through our divorce, it wasn't nearly as contentious or hard fought as some people might think divorce lawyer.
I know. That's why I think it's awesome.
Because both of us were so intent on wanting to get along and wanting to remain friendly and close for our son's benefit.
Yeah, but also
that's what we prioritized. And I see how bad it can be.
You've both seen.
Every day I experience how bad divorces can be.
Yeah.
And I wanted desperately to avoid that.
100. That's like when people are like, oh, would you do this, this, and this for your wedding? I'm like, it's going to be like not a whole situation, guys. I hate to say it to you. It's going to be so small and so not over the top. But yeah, like, I think that that's interesting because it's like you guys see people going through the absolute worst shit. And it sounded like you guys were like, well, why would we do that? We've seen it. We know.
Right.
Which is so mature. It's like the two lawyers.
No, it was very mature. And knock on wood. I mean, it worked out for our son's benefit.
And she's also a divorce attorney? No, she's just a lawyer.
She's a lawyer. She does transactional work. Yeah. When
two lawyers get divorced, can they represent themselves or do you have to get a lawyer?
No. You can anyone can represent themselves.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend it.
Yeah.
But sure, I mean, I see people in divorces who aren't lawyers who represent themselves. And again,
Okay.
I would not at all recommend that.
I've seen that.
I think it's important for, divorces are so emotional. And oftentimes emotionally driven, that it's better to have a buffer there and to have some distance from it, because if you're representing yourself, either if you're a lawyer or you're not a lawyer, it's difficult to be objective and to see, all of the potential pitfalls if you're too close in it, right? If you're living it, it's often difficult. You want someone who is more objective, who can explain the positives and negatives to a certain course of action.
No, I love that. And I mean, guys, no offense, but we're paying Rob lots of money for all these fights and he not even doing that for himself. So, grow up. I literally heard a story once where I heard that a couple was like about to finalize and they'd been fighting for like years. And then over a plate, this guy was like, "I'll never," and literally dragged it out for another year. Yep. I mean, people sound like feral.
People fight over the dishes, they fight over the silverware, they fight over anything. And it's not because they're really fighting over the dishes or the plates or the silverware, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more that's behind it.
It's emotional abuse.
People can't help but fight. And whatever particular thing they're fighting over is really just representative of them, having other stuff they're trying to get out and stuff that's unresolved that they're fighting over.
Do you find people that do that are usually the ones that have been burned, like the cheated on spouse or something?
People during the course of a marriage go through a lot. And even when there is cheating, I mean, shit's complicated.
Okay, so we're going to play a game. Okay, and it's called Love, Lies, and Legal Ties. Okay, so we are going to myth bust things for me. All right, so you have to say fact or fiction. And then if it's fiction, you have to explain in one sentence, just really quickly, why it's fiction. All right, so a prenup means you don't trust your partner. I mean, we know the answer to that one, but
fiction.
Yes, because it is for everyone. Only rich people need a prenup.
Fiction. Did I answer that?
Yeah, you did. Yes. If you have a prenup, you don't need a lawyer during divorce.
Fiction.
Okay, explain that one.
Okay. So just because you have a prenup doesn't mean that everything is going to go seamlessly or smoothly in the event of a divorce. We see plenty of cases where even though there's a prenup, there's still a huge fight during a divorce. And oftentimes it's because there are kids involved. And so people are fighting over kids, right? Even though the prenup might dictate certain financial terms, there can still be fights over kids. And then oftentimes there are fights over the agreement themselves. So just because you have a prenup, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a simple, easy, straightforward divorce. But it doesn't guarantee smooth sailing. Unfortunately.
Can it dictate hey, if we get divorced, we're going to do mediation and not fight in court?
So again, you can say in the prenup that in the event of a divorce, we'll go to mediation, but even that wouldn't prevent someone from filing an action.
And needing a lawyer. Yeah. Okay, so we've already answered this one. Prenup can include lifestyle clauses, like how many date nights you have per month.
Fiction. I mean, look, it should say fact and fiction.
Yeah.
You could put that in the agreement.
Yeah, but it's not going to be upheld.
But a court's not going to punish someone if they didn't adhere to that type of provision.
Okay. If you bring up a prenup, your partner can just say no and that's it.
Fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to sign an agreement if you don't want to. Now, the other partner can say, well, fuck that. I'm not going to marry you then, right? That could happen. But no, you can't be forced to sign an agreement.
Now I'm wondering if that's why some of my marriages broke up all of a sudden. Interesting. I couldn't ask, it's like day class A. You can hide assets and no one will ever know. Ooh.
So
I thought that was going to be fiction.
So it's usually fiction, okay, but sometimes it's fact. And what I mean by that is that, there are situations, money, unless someone deals only in cash, right, and is hiding cash someplace, money typically leaves a paper trail.
Mm.
And so with enough work,
Yeah.
money and tracing money can usually be uncovered, and hidden assets can usually be uncovered. But that's not to say that someone can't still get away with it, because there are situations where someone, if they're good enough at hiding money, they're able to do it, and they're able to do it without the other person uncovering it.
Guys, Rob's seen some shit. Okay. Yeah, like that. He's seen some shit. Okay. So that's so scary. Oh my God, I'm scared. Postnups are only for couples in trouble.
Fiction.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it's been a majority of them though. Divorce.
Sometimes it's just they didn't get around to doing it before they got married.
Okay. COVID was your best year.
Fiction.
No. Oh my God. I thought that like divorce would have been crazy during COVID.
No, so during COVID, the world stood still. I mean, the courts closed down.
Oh, that's true.
People, they had this survival mentality because no one knew what was going to happen. And so the people who had issues tended to suck it up and get along. Now, after COVID ended and when it was safe to go outside again, then we saw this sort of avalanche of pent-up, cases come, because once the courts reopened, there was this flood, it was like opening the floodgates of litigation, because all these people who were forced to shelter in place with someone they weren't getting along with, right? Everything sort of bubbled up to the surface. And so, so we had a big rush of cases post-COVID, but during COVID, nothing was happening. You couldn't get to court. I mean, it was crazy shit.
Okay. And my last one is, all divorce attorneys always get prenups. Or most.
So I'd say it's 50-50. I mean, I've known some divorce attorneys who've gotten married without prenups. And
how could they do that?
Some that have gotten married with them.
Okay, the ones that do it without, do you think they're like, I know everybody that will help me do this. I'm not worried.
The ones, I mean, they're
I know the judges.
Remember, every case is different and every situation is different. And so you can't just say, as a blanket proposition that all divorce lawyers do this or all divorce lawyers do that.
Yeah.
Each case brings its own set of circumstances, and they're situational. And so someone might have a situation where it didn't make sense to get a prenup, even if they were marrying a divorce lawyer.
But you had one.
No, I didn't have one. Nope.
Oh my God, that's so surprising. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's do a celebrity clause confessions. Okay, and I know you've seen some shit. I mean, is there anything that you can tell me? Like, what is the wildest thing somebody asked you to put into an agreement that you were like sitting there like, are you for real?
So I think that the craziest stuff that they've asked,
like
there are things that we covered before, right? There
like
these
the
lifestyle clause provisions. And I've had situations where someone asked to put in a weight provision, or someone asked to put in a minimum sex requirement. And I explained to them, like, look, it's not going to fly, right?
Well, then they have to uphold it too.
Well,
like, if you're a man,
right,
you got to perform too.
Right. You'd think that it would be reciprocal and that they do it. But that's the crazy. I mean, look, most of the people who enter into prenups, they take the agreement very seriously. They understand that it's a contract, and they're not inclined to want to put stuff in just to put it in. Now, sometimes something will be a really big deal to them, because they've been burned in the past. So sometimes they'll insist on an adultery clause, for instance, right? And I get that. But the other stuff like weight gain or, sex requirement, I mean, it's a little silly, right? Because you're marrying this person and, it's a partnership and you're going to have to work shit out. You can't contract for everything. So deal with it.
I love that. Okay. What was the weight requirement? Was it like a woman where she had to be under like 120?
Yeah, no, it was the weight. Well, it was the guy wanted like a maximum weight that she was not too that she was not to gain a certain number of pounds during something. So
oh my God, literally. And he was probably the fattest man you've ever seen. Like dead ass. The only time I've heard that is from someone who literally never goes to the gym. Just like, oh my God, just like the sex thing. Like that's so funny to me because no offense to your gender, but you guys can't perform under pressure. So like if I was in a contract with a man and he was like, you got to do it 5 times a week, I'd be like, pants off. The contract states it. Like literally you could never. I would take that so fucking serious. If anyone's out there with a prenup with that clause in it, I want you to start fucking with that person. Like, please, like contractually get your pants off. Hurry up. I only got 10 minutes. Like, let's see how that goes. That's so funny. Okay. So like, what are your top 3 like takeaways for people that are, thinking of doing a prenup or a postnup?
I would say, don't be afraid of the agreement. Don't be afraid of having the conversation about the agreement. Nowadays you don't have to be rich. You don't have to be a business owner. You don't have to be a property owner to want a prenup. It could just be a situation where you either have some assets or you plan on, earning assets in the future. And so I counsel people to be realistic.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's just, where we're struggling.
Everyone has this romanticized notion about marriage and they're hopeful. They want everything to work out, but sometimes life happens. And sometimes even the strongest, best relationships, and best marriages don't work out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No, we've all seen it. And yeah, I don't know why everyone's so afraid of things that make their lives easier, but like also we want to educate ourselves and find a good lawyer.
Yep.
We don't want to cut corners on the pricing of this stuff.
Exactly.
And ChatGPT is not your fucking friend. All right. I'm just literally like use it for like quick questions but like if you just want a quick answer, you're like, I can check this with a lawyer. Sometimes I've used it to be like, is this legal? Because I'm trying to do some fucked up shit. And my lawyer's like, I'll get back to you. And they take like, 10 business days to reply to you sometimes. Okay. So what are your like top 3 must-have clauses for most people?
Well, I can tell you the 3 most common clauses,
okay.
Right? The first is that each party's separate property remains separate.
Okay, we love that.
Okay. The second is that the appreciation on each party's separate property remains separate. That's a very common clause.
That includes the companies.
Yep.
Okay.
And the third,
pet custody.
So, okay, well, I mean, you seem to really want to talk about pet custody. So let's talk about pet custody first.
I just think it's funny.
So pet custody is not really custody in New York. Okay. And what I mean by that is that pets, even though you might think differently, right? Pets aren't considered kids in New York. Pets are considered chattel. So pets are considered a piece of property just like any other piece of property. So if you purchase the pet, if the pet belongs to you, then that is your property.
Yeah, Butters is mine.
If you both, right, in a marriage, if a couple purchases a pet together, then the pet is technically marital property. Now, I have had situations in divorces where people put in a pet sharing agreement, right? And you can do that. It's just that at the end of the day, the courts will look at pets as if they're property, not as if they're kids. And the courts aren't going to be concerned with what's in a dog's best interest or what's in a cat's best interest like they would be for a kid.
That's actually so sad. That's so funny. But Butters is mine. Nobody's fucking with him. So, okay. I would just say, remember the only thing sexier than trust is an ironclad legal agreement before you get married, guys. And at what point in the process, like how long, for like most majority of people that don't have like trillions of dollars, like how long does it typically take to make a prenup? Like how far out in advance should people plan for that?
So most people contact me after they've gotten engaged.
Right after. Okay.
And it's usually anywhere from, we'll say, 6 to 12 months before they're planning on getting married.
We love that.
Yeah. And that way it gives us enough sort of leeway to get an agreement discussed, negotiated, and executed in that time. Okay.
So, after you get engaged, you take a second to be engaged, you make your guest list and figure out your budget, then call me, then you call Rob. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure.
I'm so
Thanks for having
happy. This was a very informative chat, and I feel like a lot of people need it. So where can we find you? Like, what's your handle?
Sure. My Instagram handle is at Robert Wallach. And you can go to the Wallach Firm or wallachfirm.com online.
All right. Thank you so much for coming. Don't forget 5-star reviews only. Tell your friends, tell your families, tell your enemies. I don't care. Thanks, guys.